Let's do a little spoiler alert there. We told him to play the karaoke track of Take Me or Leave Me from Rent. So what he missed was we were going to sing it.
Sorry, come back at 12 o'clock. Okay, midnight show of Rent. But for now, we host 2 podcasts. We've been podcasting since 2018. Our first podcast was actually podcast in 2018. I came here on a bus route. Scholarship tickets. Alison and I have been performing together. We are actors, entertainers, singers, and we've been working together for over a decade. We were doing a show together in, well, we met doing Rent, but then we did a show together in New York off Broadway, and we were living together at the same time. So we were living there, making no money, eating dollar pizza. Is anyone here from New York? Okay, we lived at Lady Ridge.
Yeah.
7 stops from Philly Island. We were working in Times Square. It took us 2 hours to get home. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. So we would be on the train, and we would be eating our dollar pizza. And I'd say, Alison, what would you do if you had $10,000?
I would not be eating this pizza. I would get room service.
Room service.
That would require staying in a hotel, like a nice room. 2 beds.
2 beds. We were really poor. So, after that show closed, we were unbooked for a long period of time. Like most actors are unbooked for a lot of their career. And we were still best friends. We were trying to figure out how to stay best friends as adults and keep talking to each other and keep connected. And I said, Alison, let's start a podcast. She said, what's a podcast? Right, that's the theme, right? So I told her what it was, and we decided to build it around that same question that we talked about in the subway. So $10K Day is a comedy podcast about imaginary luxury travel. Every single episode, we spend $10,000. It's absolutely fake. It's in our head. We do real research. We spend it 24 hours in a location that is inspired by a listener suggestion. So it's a whole lot of fun.
Let's give them a preview.
Huh?
Let's give them a preview.
Oh, okay.
Okay, they're doing the video.
Oh, I'm Alison Burns. And this is $10K Day, the imaginary luxury travel podcast where we find comedy. There's only a little boat ride to the main island of Belize. Okay, so here's what's included. Because Belize is an island. Belize the place. Okay. So Belize. We have to find someone in Casper. I know someone. Let's do it. Wait, do I know them? Yeah. Okay. I don't think I want to hang out with them. You can't put that in. What if they listen to the podcast and they have an immersion table and they're going to know it's them? You can't say that. Lots of people have it. No one has it. I don't know if anybody has that table. This is on your wrong side. I want to have your dominant hand. This is on my dominant hand. Livingstone, Zambia. Ooh. Because I think I've been to Livingston, right? Have you? Not Zambia, but Livingston. His name is Andrea Matone. Hi, Andrea Matone. Yeah. And for his biggest package, $1,700 for the day. Free mini bar. All I have is $19. So I'm gonna roll. You know have you ever been like to places where you don't have enough cash and so you roll the cash up real tightly? Alison Burns. Antarctica. And I don't think there's like cities. I think it's just like Antarctica. It's research bases and that's it. But we're doing a private viewing. That's very good. Of the Vatican's secret rooms. Okay, what do you do? I don't know because it's a secret. Oh gosh, what is wrong?
Okay, now they're showing their different tweets or different kind of testimonies that they have, or different quotes, I should say. Now they're back.
You are completely we're sitting here right now, and we've been podcasting for 5 years. So we'd really love to tell you how we kept going, how we've kept motivated, how we have kind of found all these successes, personal and professional, through this podcast. We're really excited about it. So clearly we're really comfortable performing. That is something that we have just from our background. We professionally do it now. I just closed 1776 on Broadway a couple of weeks ago. Thank you. You too can make your debut after 40. And Alison.
Oh, so I manage and own a dance company and then a dance retail store. And then 2 kids and,
and lives. And we've got full grown-up lives. Like, you. So doing this is really hard if you also have grown-up lives, right? It's like, it's so hard. But we're dedicated to it. We're dedicated to the project. We're dedicated to each other, which helps. We are a duo. Some of you are not. That's harder too. So we're really lucky that we have that. But we do have a background in comedic improvisation. So we do not script our episodes. We bullet point them. And we just kind of talk around them. We didn't realize, though, how much the rules of improv, because we've grown up with them, they're in our bones, affected the way that we have treated this podcast as a project, and how it shaped us and let us find opportunities that maybe we wouldn't have found otherwise.
So we know that there, in our lives, we've used these 3 steps, a little afterthought, as to how to grow our podcast. And these are the rules of improv, which is 1, yes. Oh, I didn't know I had one.
I know, I just found that.
Number 2, yes and. Number 3, yes and make statements. And then just remembering there are no mistakes, only opportunities. Now, if you're not familiar with improv or this method of improv, the yes and method, we'll give you a little demonstration. So if this was an improv show, and Lulu and I were on stage, and I walked on stage, and I said, oh my God, Lulu, look at that rabid raccoon.
I don't see it.
Okay, right? So she just stopped the scene. Now she left everything back at me. I have to think of something new, right? She didn't say yes. There's nowhere to go from that. But if I walked in and I said, oh my God, Lulu, look at that rabid raccoon. He's eating the cats. Oh my God, he's eating the kittens, right? So there's somewhere to go with that. There's a snowball effect when you say yes, when you leave yourself open to change. And so that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today.
Me?
Yeah, me.
Okay. So, when we started, hi, that's Mike. When we started, we thought we were a travel podcast. I told you what the premise is, right? $10,000 somewhere in the world. We're looking at travel research. We're looking at hotels and restaurants. We clicked out on Apple iTunes. We were a travel podcast. But in the first few months, we started to get feedback, both from listeners and from other podcasters. Like, we would come and talk to other podcasters and say, oh, have you ever tried this? Have you tried changing your graphics because some of your text is too little? Your colors aren't great. Oh, have you tried maybe doing audio? If you ever thought about a guest? All of these little flies around in your head, right? And some of you are dealing with that right now, coming to a conference probably for the first time, going, well, I never considered writing a book, but I guess we're going to write a book. We've all been there.
Wow.
First of all, we got really defensive because we were like, we just wanted to do this for fun. Like, where is all this pressure coming from to make it right? And so we just got caught up in that. And we were trying to make this travel podcast a new thing. So we got defensive. And then we started to think about, what if we take a step back and we fight these urges to dismiss these comments immediately and just say, what are you saying? Are you saying you can't read the episode title on the graphic? That's actually a big deal. I would like to help you read the episode title, even if I spent 12 hours and I think it's real pretty right now, right? Because ultimately it's for that person, the listener, to find us. So we decided to say yes.
That's right. And so regardless of the feedback, be it good, bad, or ugly, just take a minute and say, what would happen if I just said yes? And so in regards to our biggest yes story, we're going to talk about that. So we said, at first when we got on iTunes, we said travel. This is what we are. We're talking about travel. And then I made the decision. I was like, this is a great live show. I called a venue in New York City and I said, hey Lou, we're going to do our live show in New York City. And she said, no! We had only been podcasting for like 5 months. I said, no one is going to come to the Triad Theater on 72nd to see 2 people who we don't know. It's 2018. Nobody knows what a podcast is. Absolutely not. No. And then I said, remember the yes and method. You're not practicing what you're preaching. Anything could happen. So instead, she said, yes. And then I got our lots of alcohol. And we did it. And what happened?
Alison was right. Or is this on audio recording? It's like being sent out to people because I just said that. Can you cut it out? So Alison was right. So we didn't fill the house. I was worried we weren't going to fill the house. We rented that theater. We did not fill the house.
It was close.
It was not. It was about sweet. I think we had about 25% sold in the house, which felt terrible. I couldn't see the 10 people there. I could only see the 90 empty seats, right? So I was like, no one's here. Oh my gosh, it's terrible. We're setting up for it. We're not selling the tickets. It's awful. We're in the lobby. We're talking to this woman. And she's like in our way. And she finally says, wow, you guys are really funny. As we were just talking to each other. She said, what are you doing here? We're doing a show. It's a podcast travel show. She goes, oh, well, you guys are kind of funny. Maybe I'll come see it. And we're like, okay, well, maybe not.
She did.
She's actually really nice. That's a terrible impression of her. But she did come.
And yeah, so after the show, she came up to us. She said, hey, I want to take you guys to drinks. Always a good sign. And I was like, okay, let's go. So we're sitting next to this woman who just happened to come to our show. And she said, tell me more about your podcast. And we said, well, we have this travel podcast. She said, stop. This is not a travel podcast. This is a comedy podcast. What I just saw was a comedy show. And instead of our gut reaction of being like, no, we put a lot of hard work into this. It is travel. We research places. We spend $10,000 a day in these places. It's real research. Instead, we said, maybe, yes, okay. We accepted that. Come to find out, she's a comedy booker in New York City.
Wait, the acceptance of that was not easy.
It was not
that easy. Because to call ourselves comedians felt scary. Because it felt like we had to deliver something that was like laugh out loud funny every time. Which is a false goal of comedians. You know what I mean? Like that's not a real thing. But I wasn't willing to kind of endow myself with that word because I never thought of myself that way. But we'll get to it. I'm okay with it now, but that's a slide for later.
Yeah, so the second rule, so we said yes. We were like, all right, fine, yes, we're going to be comedians. So what was our yes and? So for us, we were like, all right, let's start applying to speak. And let's do our live show. So if we're funny and we want to see it, let's go apply to podcast festivals as a show. Let's apply to other venues, even comedy shows. So we started applying to all these things. Now that may not mean anything to you. You may not want to do a live comedy show, but maybe the yes for you is, you know what, I am going to contact that celebrity that I've been really nervous to contact. Or you know what, everyone's been telling me I need to start an email list, but I know it's going to take a lot of time. I'm a little nervous, but you know what, yes, let's do that. So for us, that was our yes. Where's our yes and? That yes and is putting it into action. Actually making a choice to then go do something with that new idea.
Yeah, so we're talking about the difference between yes and make statements. When we say yes and make statements. So what's the difference between saying yes and making a statement? Well, once you commit to and, you're going to encounter hurdles. You're going to encounter obstacles. You will find yourself using cool words to make yourself take some time off. Like, I probably should get to that. I should probably start an email list to tell me I should. Maybe next week I'll do that. Or when I have enough money, I'll do that. Or when I can dedicate the time to do that, I'll do that, right? But when you really want to do it, you do it. When you want to clean your house, you clean your house. You know what I mean? But when you're not ready to clean your house, you don't clean your house. It's like how the world goes. Then someone says, I'm on my way. So that is really important because when we're talking about making statements, we're changing these words. Maybe I should, maybe I probably. Changing them to I will. That's your statement. I will make an email list this year. And we believe in saying that out loud. It puts you in a different mindset. You'll be able to think outside the box. It makes you into a solver, a problem solver. It changes your brain from dreaming into working. And we have a whole podcast about dreaming. We know dreaming. But how do you change that into working? It's to making it in your head and action.
Yeah, and the best way to do that when you make these bold statements is to tell somebody about it. If you keep it all in your head or all in your journal, sometimes you're not going to follow through. So what we would do is we would put it out there. We'll tell our listeners, hey, we're going to do this thing. And then if we don't do it, they email us. And they're like, you guys said you were going to do this thing, and you didn't do the thing. Right? So put it out there. Be bold about it. Tell it even a friend and you want to publish it. Whatever you're about to create, if it's that email list, we had to do that. We were like, we're going to start an email list, sign up for the newsletter. And then we were like, oh, we got to create a newsletter. We said it, right? We made the choice. And now you have to tell somebody about it, and now we keep you accountable for that.
Right.
So that all brings us to this last little phrase, there are no mistakes, only opportunities. Now, for us, we've made a ton of mistakes. And there's like a lot of things that we've applied for that we didn't get into. There's a lot of things that we've done that we, in retrospect, are like, oh, we shouldn't have done that. But it's all led us to where we are today, right? I mean, that's just life. I've been married 3 times. It's fine.
Yeah.
It led me to the 3rd one. He's great for now. And,
Oh!
but there are no mistakes. It's just an opportunity.
Wow.
It's a reason, a season, and a lifetime.
That's right.
What the world?
Okay. So we do have a lot of mistakes. For instance, we talked about our fear was not pressing record, but actually for me it's not plugging in the mic. Because no lie, our first episode, I didn't plug in the USB mic. I saw the stuff moving. I saw the, this is how technical we are. I saw the stuff.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize it was coming off a built-in mic on the laptop and not, I had forgotten to plug in the USB mic. So when we started singing, we didn't know. Like, we just didn't know. It's still up there. It's terrible. We have one episode where fire alarm goes off. We decided to be consistent. That was our number one goal for the first and second year because we weren't sure if we could stick through to this project. So it was about delivering every single week. We have never missed an episode. We do not do seasons. We've put out 52 episodes for 5 years, once a week, and our daily podcast, which is 10 minutes, we've done every single day since March 16th, 2020. So when we say being consistent is important to us, we really mean it. And that means that some of our audio may not be that great, and our listeners know that. What we chose to do is put a disclaimer in front of it on our older ones and say, hi, you've reached a vintage episode of 10K Dollar Day. The audio is not that great. We learned a lot the last 5 years. Come join us. You don't have to start anywhere. You don't have to start at episode 1 of our podcast. Drop in anywhere. Please suggest episode 25. That's got great audio. Whatever you want to do. But you're in control of your own narrative, and you don't. We have chosen not to delete our mistakes from our history. That may not be right for your podcast, but that's what we've chosen to do.
So now we're going to get into some real world examples of how we applied the yes and where it's gotten to us today. So, like I said, we checked that comedy box. We were like, okay, we accept what this comedy booker is telling us for a comedy podcast. So we checked, we changed it. We took off travel, we made that the second option, and we made comedy the first option. So because of that, we started embracing other yeses. We had a listener come to us and he said, hey, I love your podcast, but I don't listen on an app. I like to watch my podcast and listen on YouTube. And instead of going, oh, that's so much work. No, what do you know? It's one person. We said, hey, this guy wants it. We do one listener at a time. That's our philosophy. So we said, all right, we're going to put all of our episodes on YouTube. So that was our yes. And because of that, we've had a ton of cool content where now listeners will send us crazy drinks to try. We'll try them. Or crazy foods to try. We'll do a rosé challenge and we try all the rosés. That was my idea. And so that was kind of snowball. When you said yes, it snowballed into this amazing creation that now we have this cool YouTube channel. Our live shows, Lulu said yes. And because it went so well, then now we've done a ton of other live shows of our podcast. In fact, in 2020, our listeners told us, hey, we're feeling like, isolated, we need some happy. What? We wish you guys would come see us. We went, yeah. So we rented a minivan. The listeners helped us raise money, and we went on a 3-week driveway tour, and we did our podcast in our listeners' driveways, in their backyards. We were on a pool deck, and they invited their neighbors. Everyone was 6 feet apart, drinking beers, and we did our live show out of a minivan.
Your kids decorated the little table.
Their kids decorated.
All the videos have like little drawings. So at the top right, when I said I'm comfortable being a comedian now, it's because through a series of crazy events that all came from us saying, oh, I think we are entertainers and not travel experts, which we're not. I don't know why we ever thought that. We ended up being booked on John Fugelsang's show on Sirius XM. Don't we have...
Is this call broken?
Is this call broken? That's not helpful.
They don't
Yeah.
Are still podcasting now. We're very proud of that right now. And then maybe during the pandemic, we actually said to our listeners, we said, we don't know what to do. I feel so helpless, when the pandemic was like April, May 2020. And we said, okay, well, if you get a mask that has our hashtag on it, what's your happy, we'll donate one to a healthcare worker. We were able to donate 150, 160 masks. Remember, we're a comedy podcast. This is insane. And then one of our listeners said, I would like to spearhead something bigger than that. We ended up raising $11,000 in the hospitals in New York City and distributing food to the doctors and medical staffs in Manhattan for like 2 months or so, I think. And we worked with like seven hospitals and 50 volunteers, and it was insane.
Wow.
That all came from them saying, hey, do you think you can do that? And I was like, yeah, we'll figure it out. And I think that that's a lot of being a performer too, because you just say yes, right? Can you tap? Sure, we'll figure it out. We're late. We know, we're sorry. Get to the last slide, Alison. The next one, the next one. The last slide? Please find us. Thank you. We're done. We're out of time.
That was awesome.
When it comes to feeling, forget everything you want.